Okay, this is really interesting. So the idea of fiction, the ability to create ideas and have these ideas spread and be believed by everyone in the society in our in the Homo sapien society, that's important, right? But
Right.
so what was the next step for us to evolve to become the dominant species? What was that next step? And I think you mentioned something about another revolution.
Yeah, this was the second revolution that we recognize. It's called the agricultural revolution. I'm sure you've heard of it. Everyone's heard of it. If you've gone through world history,
And I
which
think-
you should
but
have.
it's interesting because no one ever brought up the cognitive revolution. That was like never something you were taught in school. Like the first revolution we learned was the agricultural revolution.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, to admit that the cognitive revolution exists would be almost.
Not based by too much.
It would necessarily like nullify any like religion, if that makes sense, because you're based. It's a very evolutionary. It's an evolution. It's a very evolutionary
type of
idea.
theory.
So to teach that to kids in education, it would take a lot of there's a
that's,
lot
that's,
going on.
You touch
there.
a lot of gray areas
Right.
there. That makes sense. But okay, agricultural revolution. What made the agricultural revolution so important? If you didn't already know.
Yeah, I mean, you guys probably already know this, but the fact that we could domesticate wheat and animals, or plants and animals, such that we could stay in one location and feed more people than we used to be able to, was a huge deal. Because just like we were talking about earlier, cooperation, the language that allowed, like our cognitive revolution that allowed us to cooperate through language. If we have more people cooperating, that means more ideas, more innovation, more pushing, more technology, right? And that's what pushes society forward. So when we have large groups of people in one place, that's going to allow us to create new technology, and that's what pushes societies forward, really.
So you're saying that since agricultural revolution forced us to actually now be,
it was a choice.
We were nomadic, and then so now we decide to establish civilizations, establish colonies, and all different things. It spurred that innovation because you had a bunch of people interacting, spreading ideas. But one thing you always talk about, like, agricultural revolution, like it was great, like food was a lot more abundant. You didn't have to move around, but I think the book introduced that there were cons to it, right?
Yeah, there were definitely. The author actually goes so far to say as the entire agricultural revolution was really, it was the greatest. I forget how he phrased it, but like the greatest dupe in history, or like it was one of the greatest traps in history. In the sense that once we started it, our quality of life actually went down, like considerably. And the things that there are a few things, but one thing that is really important to understand is that. Hunters and gatherers, their diets were very varied. So evolutionarily, we had grown to need a varied diet. But once you start domesticating plants, well, you just eat wheat and potatoes all the time. So your diet's like 3 things, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how we function. So it was actually very bad for our diets and our health. Once we started doing that, our immune systems got worse. When working out in the field, we're not meant to go out in the field and harvest. We haven't adapted for that completely. So we developed arthritis, slip discs, hernias, things like that. Once you start farming, an interesting thing happens where you actually start worrying about the future. Because when you're farming, you have to worry about the crops tomorrow. Is it going to rain? Is there going to be a drought? When's the harvest coming? Are we going to have enough food? Will people die? Like, there's so much to worry about in the future. But when you're hunting and gathering, you're just
I want to say that
kind of chilling.
I want to say almost that worry for the future is actually a pro, because it forced us to innovate. Because if the future like people that are successful think long term, think future wise. So in a way, it's like a con in terms of like, yes, now you had more things to worry about in your mind, but in the backhand, it's like a pro because it almost forced our society to think more future based and to then develop tools and things that would help us make agriculture a lot easier, make it more efficient, make it more scalable.
You're absolutely right in the sense that looking towards the future definitely spurs more technological change. It definitely creates more innovation and things like that. But one thing that he talks about in the book is it's called the luxury trap, and we all know this. But once we started farming, right, we're looking towards the future. Have we ever stopped looking towards the future? Like, are we continuously innovating and getting better, right?
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. The bad part comes when we start worrying so much about the future that we forget that the only thing that actually exists is right now.
Yeah.
Because if past you is worried about present you, right? Because past you being present and you now being the future. But once you got to this future point, you were worried so much about it before, but now you're not even enjoying all of that fruit of your labor that you worried for. You're worrying about more stuff in the future. So at some point, what's happening is every time you're getting, in the case of farming, we got something, right? We got a sustained ability to be in one location with actually it was a more volatile food supply, technically speaking. But the point is we could stay in one location, but that gave us obligations to farm. That gave us obligations to feed a lot more people. That gave us obligations, for all these things for our families and whatnot. And as we keep going, look at our obligations now. Look, we have to go to school at a certain time. We have like all these social constructs. When you go, even when you're driving, you have to be. There's so many things. There's so many responsibilities that we have now that have just been building since the agricultural revolution, and that has created so much responsibility. And we're so far into it now that we never even think about right now. We're just worried about the future. Sorry, that was like a really long monologue.
It was a very interesting monologue, and like I agree with you on parts and I disagree with you on parts, because it makes me think like, well, what if we just stop? Like, in a way, if we just stop thinking about the future, then what about global warming? What about climate? Like all these different, what about, just wanting to make the life of our next generation of kids better, right? So it's very conflicting, but I do want to ask though, like, if it lowered our standard of living, like why did we continue? Is it just because of the trap? Was it like...
And it's literally a trap. So think about if you are producing more food, so just like mathematically speaking, you can produce more food per square foot when you're doing agriculture than you can. There's more resources in agriculture than there is for hunting and gathering. So when you have agriculture, you can actually support a larger population. But imagine they actually realized that their agriculture had produced a worse quality of living. Yeah. Well, to go back to hunting and gathering, some of their people would die, just based off resources. They don't have enough resources in that area to keep that many people, so they're forced to stay there. And also the changes between successive generations and improvements in agriculture were so slow that you don't really notice that your quality of living is going down. So once that happened, right, then you're stuck there. And think about, the same thing has really been happening with the Industrial Revolution. Could you imagine living without a computer? Never, right?
I would not have a future job prospect without a computer.
So we have all these things, it plays back into that trap where once we get there, we can't go back. It's that luxury has become a necessity, and now we're stuck there.
But then the last argument on this point, I would actually counter that to say but isn't all of technology? I feel like technology is very one way. There's not you don't make technological advances and then go backwards to it.
You can definitely regress. Think about the Egyptians. They built the pyramids millennia ago, but they never built any more. What happened? They just lost that ability. You think they were just they didn't have anything to do?
No, okay. That ability, they didn't lose that ability to build those huge.
So they just chose not to build anymore?
No, it's not that they just chose not to do it anymore. I'm not saying.
Okay.
You're taking the point why don't you just keep doing the same thing, right? It's more you take that idea, the way they did that, and that was able to apply to different civilizations. Those techniques they used to do it, the technology.
You're definitely right on a macro scale. For sure. Technology is definitely improving, but it's not, we can lose technology and our ability to improve for millennia, really. It's happened in history multiple times, actually.
I'm gonna need some evidence, because I'm a tech pro, a tech optimist here, so anything that has to do with technology, I'll admit I'm pretty biased about it. But again, I still think that it's weird. This is a very this whole. I need to read this book, because this book makes you it really will make me be it'll conflict with a lot of my own beliefs and everything, just because I believe that us continuously improving is the only reason why actually not. Here's something I just thought about. Us continuously improving is almost making up for all the negatives that happen due to us continuously. We have to continuously improve because we continuously add more negatives as we improve. Right. So we have to cover ourselves on those negatives by improving. And it's this constant cycle, this trap that it...
It's kind of like that idea where, you have a circle, right? Yeah. And as your circle, in our instance, as our circle of technology grows, the perimeter around the circle is the number of problems that are associated with the technology. So even though our technology is solving more problems, that perimeter is also growing, creating more problems. And as we're creating more technology, which are the solutions to our problems, we're inadvertently creating more problems continually forever. And that's, that's just a hypothesis. It's just a model. It's an analogy. Doesn't mean it's true, but it's an idea.
My boy Biggie said, more money, more problems.
That's
all right?
facts.
More solutions, more problems. But that's interesting, though, because that idea itself, like, was introduced to me when I was thinking about entrepreneurship, because I was like, man, like, I need to hurry up and, like, come up with a business that solves a problem, because, like, all the problems going to be taken away. But then, like, someone said, like, no, like, there's always going to be problems. Like, when a new technology or something's introduced, like, again, I'm going to bring up blockchain just because it's on my mind. It's fresh. But blockchain itself, like Bitcoin, it has some issues to it. Like, yes, it solved a lot of problems in socioeconomic and all that other stuff, but it also introduced problems that, like, itself, you can look at more on a technical point of view, that it's not very scalable. So then that itself was a problem, and now there's people working on solutions to it, and then it's just like this constant, like you said, the circle keeps getting
bigger and bigger. And you can see that very well with also, like, our development of academics over the years. Like, think about economics as a study of money, right? Yeah. Okay, 10,000 years ago, there was no money, so economics effectively did not exist, right? But as we've created larger and more intricate societies, money became an important medium of exchange for us to be able to form the societies. But now we need studies for economists, and now these days we have, you know, financial analysts and accountants, and everyone and their mom has something to do with the money, right? Because that's important to our society. So same thing's going to keep happening with. You see it right now with computers. Computers are becoming increasingly more important, and everyone is getting in on it because it's happening, and that's part of the cycle.